Hello, hello. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you're tuning into this. Welcome to Limitless Live. I am your host, and I'm not usually the host, Dr. J, Dr. Julia West, and I'm thrilled to be here with you today with our resident head coach slash comedian. You know him as Josh Lifrak.
What's up? I don't know why I'm doing this. I just thought I was trying to Euro step.
Comedian. Yes.
It's
Friday.
It is Friday.
It's Friends and Family Friday here on Limitless Live.
Friday before Labor Day, which is awesome.
It is that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of hard to believe.
Are you doing anything fun for the holiday? Holiday.
We usually do lots of like family time. We'll probably do some pool time, maybe some type of tasty grilled food. What about you?
Zero plans. Zero. We had a little bit of a week here, just in terms of a storm coming through. So there's a lot of like yard work and stuff that needed to get done during the week. So I think we're just gonna be, pretty mellow. Might hang out with some friends. Might go rock climbing. I don't know. We went surfing this morning. That was pretty good. So just kind of just.
What I love about your definition of mellow is that it includes surfing and rock climbing, because like that is not my definition of mellow. My definition of mellow would be like reading, watching movies.
I am going to read this weekend. I have a couple sitting around. That's a great idea, Dr. West.
You know what? Before we get started about what we're going to talk about today, Josh, I'm really curious. Have you read anything good lately that you want to tell our listeners about?
Yeah, I'm in the midst of Think Again, which is awesome.
Ooh, yeah, Adam Grant.
Adam Grant.
Yeah,
that's really good. I also just read the what was it called? Shoot! It's now slipping my mind. Something about being a great teammate. Patrick Lencioni.
Yeah.
So it's it's really, really good.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I forget the actual name. It's something teammate. Maybe Mari on the backside. You can look up Patrick Lencioni titles and look up the word Lencioni. That guy Lencioni. You can tell. Whatever. His books are awesome though, because have you ever read any?
I have. I really like his approach to talking about team dynamics, and he talks about like functional teams, and also like he goes. What I always think of now is like the Limitless Minds route a little bit, where he'll talk about like how to excel at something, but then he'll also talk about how to, like, he calls it dysfunctional teams. Like we would say like how to suck at being a good team, right? Like, so I appreciate sort of like that, back and forth, that juxtaposition that he makes. I think it really hammers it home, at least for me. Yep. So I like his take a lot.
The Ideal Teammate is the name of it.
Oh, okay. That's the name of the book. All right, awesome.
And yes, and I love that he like kind of stories it.
Yes.
Right? Like as you read his books, you're almost like it's almost like a soap opera in a lot of ways. Like they're page turners. I'm like, oh, what's gonna happen next to Sandra in HR? Like I'm just like you just kind of keep rolling them. They're really great.
I feel like that's the only time that phrase has ever been said ever, right? Where that's like exciting. I recently also read a page turner, but it was more for personal enjoyment. I always try to be reading two things at once, like something that expands my personal development and something that I'm just reading for me, like for enjoyment. And what I just finished was the Colleen Hoover book, It Ends With Us. So I don't know if anybody here today has read that book, but I thought it was really interesting, a very interesting take on a difficult yet important topic. I won't give any spoilers for those of you who are still looking to read it.
I really, really quick. I heard something years ago, and they said you're either doing one of two things. You're either entertaining, or you're either reading something or consuming for education or for entertainment. So you kind of nailed both of those.
I feel like that is a great segue, because what we do at Limitless Minds, we're Josh, do you know this, that we are in the process of trademarking this term for us? I call it entertraining.
Entertraining.
We entertain while we train, and we have some of our lovely speakers and coaches in the virtual audience with us here today that do that, a lot of that enter training for us. Although arguably you are one of our most enter training coaches, I could say that. I feel like
the big key is I just try to entertain myself. And then I'm like, if I'm giggling at my own jokes, I figure the audience might laugh at them too. That's the whole thought process.
it probably works like half the time. Right?
Half the time, yes.
I
do like that we got Rebecca and
Yes.
the man, the myth, the legend of Justin Hirsch.
Justin Hirsch.
Who,
Hi, everybody.
You call Justin. I owe you a call, my
man. So, okay, let's not have any further ado about what it is that our topic is today. As has happened before, Josh will come to me and say, all right, Dr. West, what do you want to talk about? Because he knows that I love talking. I have to tell you a very quick joke that hopefully everybody will think is funny. Yesterday was the 19th anniversary of the day I met my husband for the first time back in 2004. And when I said to him very sweetly, like we met 19 years ago today, he said, I remember that night you couldn't talk because I had laryngitis. And he goes, and you've been making up for it ever since. It was really funny. And also kind of a backhanded compliment.
You didn't have a comeback either. He's just really
funny. Didn't. I was just like, that was mean and true. So I don't really know what to say. Right. Like I just have to accept that about me. So we want to talk. So in that moment, folks, I had to be resilient.
Yes.
And that's what we want to talk about today.
We want to talk about the worst transitions we've ever had.
Do you think that felt really natural? So that's kind of why
I was going to say the fact that we're going into Labor Day, right?
Oh, okay.
Traditional, like, kind of a reset and a respite before, boom, a gauntlet of time until we get to until we get to Thanksgiving, really.
Yeah.
We really kind of just head down from here on out for most people in the workforce.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about how I really appreciate, this holiday, everybody kind of just, let's take a break. Let's get ourselves reset. And now, boom, let's go. So how do we be resilient moving into this next period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to break it down for you. Surprise, I've done a lot of research on resilience. This is like one of the things I love to do. I know, right? It's shocking.
Shocking term.
And here's what I found. The resilience literature there's so much of it. It's vast. Even the word resilience is kind of a contested term what do we include under resilience and what does it really mean? What does it not mean? And what are the subcomponents? It can be so confusing. So what I want to do today, Josh, which is something I feel like you and I do really well, is let's do simple better when it comes to resilience.
Yeah.
And so I boiled it down here to 3 characteristics that resilient people have in common with one another. You want to know what they are?
I do. Can I say I'm going to guess right out of the top of my head?
Yes, go.
A bias for commitment is in there, right? Like so, a lot of people who are resilient have this feeling of commitment, and I want to talk about that a little bit later. But go ahead.
It's almost like you had the 3 things before I mentioned.
I may have read the notes.
You were able to put your finger on that. But yes, you're right. Okay, so the 3 elements. Are you ready, folks? Get your pens or pencils out, whatever it is that you take notes with, because this has really helped me understand resilience in a new way, and I hope it helps you do this. Okay, 3 characteristics all resilient people have in common. Acceptance. Resilient people embrace the rain to help them grow. Okay, they see challenges as opportunities in disguise. Okay, so they see the opportunity in the adversity. And part of what that allows them to do is to spend less time lamenting reality. Before I go on to the rest, I just want to say acceptance doesn't mean you love what's happening. It means that you aren't going to fight against the reality of your situation.
Yeah, you're not lamenting against. I love that phrase, lamenting against reality. But you know what this is, Julia? This is the neutral mindset.
100%.
Absolutely 100% the neutral mindset.
Do you think I might have done that on purpose? No, definitely.
definitely not.
No, coincidence. It's a
But
coincidence.
the thing about it that's like
Yeah.
that is the core of the
Yeah.
neutral mindset, because
Yeah.
it's those I think about it from the I was just talking to a group the other day about this thing called pre-excusing. And it was a term I had only heard once I got into athletics.
Okay.
Where
I've never
people
heard
were
this.
like, "Hey man, yeah, I'm going into that at bat, and but my hand feels a little bit sore today. It's so cold today," and they're pre-excusing prior to their performance element, right? And so I hadn't heard of it. Some of the athletes had mentioned it to me. It's like, yeah, I got to stop pre-excusing. And I was like, what's pre-excusing mean? And they would say, I would do this, this, and this to set myself up for failure, and then I would be able to accept the failure because I already knew I had the built-in excuse, right? So really self-aware, athletes is awesome. But like that whole thing, like acceptance is like, this is just what's so. Yep. This is what's in my face. This is what's in my space. It might be hard, and that's fine, right? We're trying to take out judgment, but here it is. And instead of me running away from it, I'm being the bison and I'm running towards it.
Absolutely. 100%, right? Like all of that energy that we could spend fighting against what is, we could instead use to decide what to do next, right? And that's what neutral thinking is about. So the first element of resilience, of the three that all resilient people have in common, acceptance. Okay, the second is influence. And I want to explain what I mean by that, because I don't mean necessarily that they're the ones that have the most influence in a room full of people. What I mean is that resilient people have a strong belief in their ability to influence things around them. Right? Meaning that resilience isn't really about avoiding the storm. It's about recognizing how to use your tools to be able to navigate it.
So is it a little bit of like self-efficacy in a lot of ways?
It's 100%. It's self-efficacy. It's also touching on another, I think, kind of very academic-y term, locus of control, right? Yeah. So people who are resilient are more likely to have, and locus of control is not either or. It's often presented like this in literature. It's kind of more like a mix. But people who are resilient are more likely to have that internal locus of control, strong mix of, hey, the things that I do, I am capable of doing things that can affect change, results, outcome, et cetera, which breeds things like motivation and the willingness to do the third thing, which is what you mentioned. Resilient people have a commitment to action, right? Action is their anchor. Resilience in itself is kind of like an active commitment to self-improvement and taking things head on. So when we think about things like coping, a resilient person is more likely to do what psychologists call active coping instead of passive coping. What can I do to help myself in this situation? What can I do to manage this stressor that I might not be able to change? I might not be able to take it away. What can I do to better manage it for myself? Right? And so those three things, acceptance, a belief in their personal influence, and a commitment to action towards self-improvement, those are three elements you're going to see in folks that generally we could all agree on are resilient people.
Yeah, that's awesome. Question for you. I have a picture in my mind of what resiliency is, and I'm using a very specific human example. So I'm curious, like, so have you ever heard of Rick and Dickie Hoyt? Have you ever heard those names before? Okay. So worth a YouTube Google with a giant box of tissues. Just Rick and Dickie Hoyt were this father and son team that completed Ironman triathlons.
Okay.
Now, here's what's interesting about them. Rick could not walk, could not speak, and was wheelchair bound for his entire life. I believe it was something with MS or something to that nature.
Okay.
And so his father, who started doing these when he was about 50, would put him in a blow-up raft for the 2.5 mile swim and pull him behind. And then he would place him on front of his bike in a special seat that was so not aerodynamic,
Right.
and it was just brutal, right? And like you must have been like riding uphill both ways for everybody else in the race. And then the last part of it was during the run, he would have him in a stroller type thing that had big tires on it and stuff.
Yeah.
But they completed tons of marathons and tons of Ironman triathlons and things like that. And I think of that those two of them, both Ricky and Dick, because Ricky, even though he's passive in a way, right? He's not physically, he's enduring. He's enduring the being out in that race for 8 to 9 hours. And that dealing with the salt water, dealing with the wind, dealing with the heat, all that stuff. And Ricky loved it. It was just like absolute, like there was like, Dad, when I'm with you and I'm running, I'm just going to tear up. He says, I don't feel like I'm handicapped.
Oh.
Right. So, tissues. So I believe they both passed away since, but it's because they were doing this when I was, probably like, I remember seeing their first story when I was like 15 or so.
Oh my gosh. So a really long time ago.
Yeah. They did it for a really, really long time, but look them up. They're amazing. But you took about these three things. There's the acceptance of what is, like Ricky's not running. All right. But we can get him to run in a real way. Right. The influence. Here's my locus of control. This is what I can control. I can put him in the raft. I can train for it. I can put him in this thing that we made in our garage. Right. And then the commitment. Action. I mean, it was right there. Do you have an image in your head, like a story, something to that nature? When you think of like, oh, resilient, these are like the most resilient. Just out of curiosity, those in the chat, if you've heard of Rick and Dickie Hoyt, just give us a thumbs up or, mention that.
I'm sure I will if I think about it. But instead, I feel like sometimes my brain thinks in words sometimes instead of pictures, almost like I get a picture of words. And the words that I feel like encapsulate this for me, Josh. So actually, I heard this back at the Lake Nona Impact Forum that in 2022. So you and I were there. It was like the day before the war in Ukraine started, right? It was Russia.
The Clinton talk the next day, right?
Exactly. We saw President Clinton literally during the invasion. We were sitting there with him. And the day before, this very dear friend of the Clintons and this very prolific physician, Paul Farmer, had passed away. Right. And one of Paul Farmer, so maybe this is the image, right? It's of Paul. He had dedicated so much of his life. He was a doctor to bringing really wonderful healthcare to rural places and countries where this didn't exist. I want to say, it was Haiti. And whoever was there kind of remembering him on the stage said, Paul Farmer used to say, when everybody else in the room was saying, can we make it? Paul was saying, how can we make it?
Yeah.
And that stuck with me, right? Not can we make this work? When it was important enough that it was like failure is not an option here, the resilient voice in that room was saying, how can we make this work? Right. So that's kind of how I think about it, right? That, sometimes you're going through something and you're committed to it turning out a certain way. And so when the chips are down or the facts don't necessarily support the way you want it to turn out, so many of us, and I've been here myself, are thinking like, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to go. And I feel like when I'm really at my best resilient self, I start bobbing and weaving in those moments and thinking, wait a minute, okay, this might not look the way I wanted it to look. It might not look the way I thought it needed to look, right? But how can we make it look now to still get as close as possible to where it is that we want to be? And so that for me is resilience. And it's funny, right? Like it also to me is neutral thinking, right? Like that's that's what I think resilience, it's weird. It's like a bi-directional arrow. Neutral thinking promotes resilience, and resilience allows you to be a better neutral thinker, right? It's like both and.
Yeah, it's really amazing as you break down neutrality and you break down resilience, how just intertwined they are. One of the things I think that's really crucial too is as we talk about, the Limitless Minds kind of philosophies and ethos. And Trev, to the don't say stupid stuff out loud.
Right.
And this is really interesting in terms of commitment. And I was talking to, we used to do this with athletes all the time. And it really, it made, talk about, I'm dating myself, right? There was a movie that I watched in the movie theaters, and it had a little green guy in it, and it took place in space. And that little green guy was like this great philosopher with a Jim Henson voice, Yoda, of course, right? And Yoda had the phrase that I used throughout my athletic career: try. There is no try. There is only do or not do. And I think that that's one of those words we talked about pre-excusing before, but that's one of those words, try, eliminating that. If I'm going to be really resilient, it's not about trying, it's about doing. And it's about that, like you said, that bias for action and that bias for commitment. I have this on my desk. This was given to me by my late mother when I graduated from grad school. And it was, what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? That was the phrase, right? It's a little metal piece. It's what would you do? What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? And that mindset right there, it's, you're going to go ahead and how can we do this? What are the steps I need to take in order to get this done? We went down this road. It didn't work, but we saw some progress here, which means, hey, if we go over here a little bit, this is going to, but that objective and that end goal, we aren't stopping until it comes to fruition. Mm-hmm. And so that jumps out at me too. I think, that commitment piece that we talk about and within the world of language.
Yeah.
So that's what erodes commitment, is how you speak about it. What enhances commitment is how you speak about it.
Yeah. I think that's true. For sure. I'm noticing that one of our audience members, Rebecca, has put something into the chat. I'm going to read it, and then Josh and we can talk about this, and for other people in the chat, pop in too. So Rebecca says, what are your suggestions for getting resilience back when you have been working diligently toward a goal and are not seeing a result? Right? For example, I was laid off in April and have been diligently searching and taking all actions suggested by coaches, career counselors, etc., to secure a new position, and it hasn't happened yet. So Rebecca's saying, Josh, that you gave her a partial answer. Don't stop until you reach the goal. Rebecca, so it's my turn. I'm going to pick out one word that you said in that message that I would zero in on, that has helped me when I've been in a situation where I thought something would have happened by now and it didn't happen by now. You said yet. So this is like probably the most powerful 3-letter word, maybe aside from and, right? Like, as I know that's Travis's, but for the right mindset for these times, right? So yet is the growth mindset word for sure. Let me tell you why I think yet or now helps with emotional resilience, which is something that when you're in a position like yours, you need. I think when we are in the dark with something, part of why it feels so unbearable is because our brains extrapolate it out like it's going to be lasting forever. I know, like, when I work with folks that have really intense anxiety or panic attacks, actually, which is one of my clinical specialties, is in treating panic attacks. One of the things that people will say to me time and again is like, I can't stand this when it happens. And I feel like I'm going to die. I feel like it's like never going to end. And so one of the things that we do is we start to label, this is happening right now. This doesn't last forever, right? And part of what that does in those moments is makes a little bit of room, right, for what we really need right now, which is hanging on to hope. Right now, this is what this is like. Yes, that's true. We don't want to Pollyanna this. We don't want to like throw toxic positivity at you, right? That's not helpful. That sucks. We don't do that at Limitless Minds, right? And let's be really clear about what this means and what it doesn't mean.
Yeah.
It's happening right now, yes. It doesn't mean it's happening like this forever.
Yeah, that was Julia. That was the big thing I was going to say too. Like, just check your stories, right? Yeah. Right, like check, like, because the natural proclivity of somebody who's in your situation would be like, why doesn't anybody like me? I'm not good. Da, 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 da. And you create these labels and this judgment and this meaning behind it. Maybe you weren't saying that, so I apologize if you weren't. But like, if that is
something I would do,
absolutely. I mean, I did it certainly when I was unemployed, and so
100%.
You know, it really is. You know, checking your meaning.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is like looking at your accomplishments for the day. Just accomplish something that, you know, just like Matt Miller said it, like check, you know, what's the next right step.
Yeah.
Right. And so did I take those next right steps?
Absolutely.
Did I do all those things? Yes, no. At the end of the day, yes. Okay. Today's a win. Maybe I didn't get the job I wanted, or maybe that hasn't happened for me. But, you know, and
this is the process over outcome period of time, Rebecca.
Yeah,
really, like you're in it. Like people, and this is one of the things that like I think happens a lot. Like we hear these things, we hear these phrases all the time, like process over outcome. And then like nobody, at least for me, I'm always waiting for somebody to describe like, what does that actually feel like in life? You're in it right now.
Yeah.
Like you are in a process over outcome period of time right now where you need to really invest in the process piece and recognize that that is the piece that's within your control. The other thing that I want to put out there, and Krista, you know, is saying this, like, you know, surrender to the moment doesn't mean you give up. Here's the other thing I really feel like would be helpful for you and anybody else going through this right now: support. So I'm glad that you're here and that you're talking about it, right? A lot of times, like, especially I think with things about jobs, there's a lot of like shame, whether we want to say that word out loud or not. I was just actually on a podcast that dropped earlier this week with one of our room tilters, Colin Henderson, talking about shame. That can be really destructive to hope and resilience, right? So what you're doing now, Rebecca, is you're killing the shame. Shame is like a mushroom. It needs the dark to grow, right? So by talking about it, by putting it under the light, you are getting rid of the shame. And the other thing, and I don't think he's here today, and my apologies, Lane, if I'm throwing you under the bus here unnecessarily, but Rebecca, one of our other viewers, Lane Hagerdorn, has a wealth of recent experience and a tremendous number of like really helpful LinkedIn posts as he navigated his own journey from one job to the next. If you haven't looked him up, on LinkedIn, his name is Lane Hagerdorn, and he has posted about Limitless Lives quite a bit. You might find something really useful on his page as well as ours. And I hope that what we share today, including not just Josh, but also Krista and Matt Miller, has helped you out a little bit. We're pulling for you. And you know what? We don't talk about theories. We talk about real life. And you shared the real essence of resilience today. So thank you for showing up.
Yeah, just remember, Rebecca, it's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when.
100%.
Number one. Number two, go do yourself a favor, watch Finding Nemo, and just keep swimming. And with that,
Dory.
Yeah, exactly. It's a story, right? Just keep swimming.
Absolutely. So with that, oh my gosh, we're
gonna run. We're gonna be late for our next meeting, Julia. We gotta bounce. We
gotta bounce. But listen, thank you so much.
We're back on Tuesday. We're back on Tuesday. Have an amazing Labor Day.
Great Labor Day weekend.
See you all when we see you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bodies has limits. The mind is limitless.
It is limitless.
Badoosh. Leaving.